Okay, and we're live. Today I'll look at Surah 77, which is entitled The Emissaries. It's also called Winds Sent Forth, Al Mursalat. So, this, according to Islamic tradition, this was revealed to Muhammad while he was in a cave, and I think I disconnected. Um, all right, I'll be back. I think I was disconnected for a moment. Anyway, this was revealed to Muhammad while he was in a cave, and a snake leaped upon him. That's one tradition. Another is that this was the last thing his mother heard before she died. It's dubious whether either of those is correct, but that's what Muslims believe. So he begins by swearing again. I swear by the emissary winds sent one after another for men's benefit by the raging hurricanes. So here he's swearing by the winds rather than the moon or Sirius or the sun or the Quran, but he's still swearing. And as I said in another video, this is a contradiction of what you're told by God in the Bible to do. So in Matthew 5:34, Jesus says, "But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is by God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king." So Muhammad did that. And James 5:12, of course, this is his letter to the church. And it says, "But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath." And Mohammed, of course, swore by all of these things. "But let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay, lest ye fall into condemnation." Hi, Hafsa. Thanks for joining us. So he not only swears by the wind, and which scatter clouds to their destined places, then separate them from one another, but also in verse 5, it says he swears by the angels. So then I swear by the angels who bring down the revelation to clear or to warn. Most surely what you are threatened with must come to pass. So this is another area where Muhammad did not understand the Bible or did not really care about the Bible, despite what he says regarding the gospel and the Torah. He repeatedly violates God's commandments in different ways and doesn't acknowledge the supremacy of God. And this is one area where he swears by the angels. Hi, John. Hi, John. So this is one area where it's just another very transparent indication that Muhammad doesn't have any sort of relationship with God. So if you go to the book of Hebrews, the first chapter of Hebrews is written to Jewish believers, most likely by Paul, and he's trying to make them understand the deity of Christ and the supremacy of Christ above all things. So it begins with the first verse. God, who at sundry times and in divers manners past, in divers manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son, whom he hath appointed heir of all things, by whom also he made the worlds, who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person, and upholding all things by the word of his power, when he had by himself purged our sins, sat down on the right hand of the majesty on high, being made so much better than the angels, as he hath by inheritance obtained a more excellent name than they. For unto which of the angels said he at any time, Thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee? And again, I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. And again, when he bringeth in the first begotten into the world, he saith, and let all the angels of God worship him. Notice all angels. And of the angels he saith, who maketh his angels spirits and his ministers a flame of fire. But unto the Son he saith, Thy throne, O God, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of thy kingdom. Thou hast loved righteousness and hated iniquity. Therefore God, even thy God, hath anointed them with the oil of gladness above thy fellows. And thou, Lord, in the beginning hast laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of thine hands. They shall perish, but thou remainest, and they all shall wax old as doth a garment. And it continues in verse 13. But to which of the angels said he at any time, Sit on my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool? And he's quoting the psalmist here. Are they not ministering spirits sent forth to minister for them who shall be heirs of salvation? So this is his description of what the angel's purpose is, and he's making it clear that these beings were not designed to be worshipped, despite the fact that they had played a crucial role in leading Israel and rescuing Israel. In the Old Testament, they ministered to Israel, and when they were besieged, and they wiped out Israel's enemies. And there was a connection between Israel and angels, but he's emphasizing the fact that angels are subservient and designed to fulfill the purposes of Christ, who is sovereign and in control of everything. So when Muhammad here is swearing by the angels, he's indicating that he doesn't have respect for God, and God or even Allah. If you believe that Allah is God, he's saying he doesn't have respect for Allah because he's on the same plane or equivalent to angels. Hi, Air Church. And this is just another indication that Muhammad did not have a real relationship with God because he didn't understand fundamentally who God was. So in verse 7, it says, Most surely what you are threatened with must come to pass. So when the stars are made to lose their light, and when the heaven is rent asunder, and when the mountains are carried away as dust, and when the apostles are gathered at their appointed time, to what day is the doom fixed? To the day of decision. And it's interesting that he mentions apostles in the Quran. If you take the Quran at its word, you would have to give respect to Paul, who was an apostle of Christ and one of Jesus's disciples. And the Quran and Islamic tradition esteems Jesus, and not only Jesus, but Jesus and his disciples. And this is something that David Wood emphasized in his series Muhammad versus Paul, which I would recommend watching if you have the chance. It's on his channel. All of the videos are uploaded, and I think there's one video that contains all of the shorter videos in one, and it's about an hour long, I believe. But it's basically comparing Paul as an apostle of Christ to Muhammad, whom Muslims believe is a prophet, and testing whether or not each one really was a prophet. And you have to keep in mind, when the Quran esteems Jesus, or at least who the character they consider to be Jesus, not the real Jesus, but theoretically, if you ask a Muslim, do you respect Jesus? And they'll say, yeah, yes. Well, you also have to respect his apostles, because they're also described as God's people in Islam. And one of Jesus's chief apostles was the apostle Paul. And if you compare the life of Paul to the life of Muhammad, you understand what a true apostle is, what someone actually anointed by God is, and how Muhammad fails that test. So in verse 14 it says, "And what will make you comprehend what the day of decision is? Woe on that day to the rejectors! Did not we destroy the former generations? Then did we follow them up with later ones? Even thus shall we deal with the guilty. Woe on that day to the rejectors." And this is something that's repeated over and over in this surah. Um, and this is one of the reasons people, the Muslim claim that the Quran is, that the Quran can't be reproduced, that it's some sort of incredibly aesthetically pleasing document, that it's a remarkable work of literature, is belied by reading the actual book. So you keep hearing these repetitions, and Muslims will say this is a poetic device, but it's really just a monotonous sort of incantation. The way you see Hare Krishnas or some other cult just repeat the same mantras over and over again until it bores into your brain. That's what Muhammad is doing with the Quran. So woe on that day to the rejectors. Did we not create you from contemptible water? And again, Muhammad isn't sure of what man was created from: water, dust, clay, blood. Then we placed it in a secure resting place till an appointed term. So we proportion it. How well are we at proportioning things? And again, Allah is forced to brag about his own greatness, uh, even with the most minute details. The irony here is that Muhammad doesn't understand human anatomy or astronomy, and yet he has Allah bragging about his creation of the universe and of man, despite the fact that Allah has a huge gap in scientific knowledge. So he can't actually describe the human anatomy. He doesn't know basic physiology, and yet you have him bragging about his creation of man. So in 24 it says, "Woe on that day to the rejectors! Have we not made the earth to draw together to itself the living and the dead, and made therein lofty mountains, and given you to drink of sweet water?" And as I mentioned in another video, or Allah doesn't understand mountains and how they work. He believes they prevent earthquakes. So in 28 it says, "Woe on that day to the rejectors! Walk on to that which you called a lie. Walk on to the covering having three branches, neither having the coolness of the shade, nor availing against the flame. Surely it sends up sparks like palaces, as if they were tawny camos." And camos again are invoked because it's an easy referent for someone who's in Arabia and living in Arabia. So in 34 it says, "Woe on that day to the rejectors! This is the day on which they shall not speak, and permission shall not be given to them, so that they should offer excuses. Woe on that day to the rejectors! This is the day of decision. We have gathered you and those of yore. So if you have a plan against me. Woe on that day to the rejectors." And to me, even though presumably it refers to Allah, it really is just so it's something that's synonymous with Muhammad. So when I said that Muhammad was Allah's alter ego, you can really understand that when you read these verses, and it's Muhammad lashing out at the Quraysh and the tribes that have rejected his message. So, but it would be too revealing if he just claimed that this itself is something that's worthy of being condemned to hell. So he uses impersonal Allah rather than just say this is something, disrespecting me is something that should be worthy of being cast into hell. So he describes planning against Allah, but it really is planning against Muhammad, or or resisting Muhammad. This is something that Muhammad believes is worthy of eternal damnation. In 41, it says, "Surely those who guard against evil shall be amid shades and fountains and fruits as they desire. Eat and drink pleasantly because of what you did." And again, there's a paradise wherein Allah or God is completely absent. Surely those do we reward the doers of good. No mention of belief in Allah. Woe on that day to the rejectors. Eat and enjoy yourselves for a little. Surely you are guilty. Woe on that day to the rejectors. And as I said, this is repeated a dozen times in this surah, and it's repeated once more in verse 49. In verse 48 says, "And when it is said to them, bow down, they do not bow down. Woe on that day to the rejectors." So it's repeated one final time. And in verse 50, "In what announcement then after it will they believe?" And this is Muhammad emphasizing the fact that he is one in a tradition of prophets and apostles who've warned the world that they're going to be condemned if they don't accept Allah. But the problem is there's no evidence that anyone before Muhammad believed in Islam, or preached Islam, or tried to get people to accept belief in Allah as the one God. So uh, he's simply using this to bolster his own very fragile, or as I would say, non-existent claims to prophethood, trying to wedge himself into this tradition of prophets um, like Elijah, like like Jonah, when it doesn't really fit. It's like putting a square peg into a round hole, but it's something he does in order to legitimize his own actions and his own self-created religion. Anyway, that is Surah 76, 77 rather, and Surah 78 is the great event. We'll see what that is in the next video. Thanks, everyone.